exhausted, watching light-clad dames through the water, catching light like blades through your body. The party's ablaze.
Come on in, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started shortly.
Grew apart when you were fighting with your sister. I don't think I realized how horribly I missed you now. Regret is flowering inside me while I'm scooping knives. Hope you know that I just don't know what to do. 'Cause I only wanna be with you.
Hey, everyone. Drop your name in the chat.
There was something strangely romantic in our friendship. We were dramatic. I wept in your arms, talking for hours on the gravel, letting our backs burn. Walking to boxes, linking pinkies, wearing matching pearl. And now I'm struggling, I'm choking up without the words.
Welcome.
Hope you know that I just don't know what to do. 'Cause I only wanna be with you.
Welcome, everyone. We'll start
I just miss your voice, saying we're alright. Calling when you're lonely late at night. 'Cause I only wanna be with you. So I make my way over as the white lightning zigzags, and you're with Ahmed, plum red slats and tequila Fraser, and you laugh the same.
Welcome. Just letting a few more join, and we'll get started shortly.
And I'm scared to speak as I catch a whiff of your rose dip tea. I just don't know what to do. 'Cause I only wanna be with you.
Welcome to those who are just joining. Please throw your name in the chat so we know who you are. Welcome.
Calling when you're lonely late at night. 'Cause I only wanna be with you. Only wanna be with you. I only wanna be with you. Only wanna be with you.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Green the Grid Midweek MythBuster Voices from the Frontline. I'm Edilah Jordan. Many of people call me EJ. I am the Senior Director of Transformative Communities at dream.org. And I am so thrilled to have so many advocates, partners, and community leaders joining us from across the country. So thank you so much for being here and taking place in this conversation with us. For those of you who may be new to our community, dream.org is a national 501c3 working at the intersections of climate, justice, and technology. Our work connects people who have historically been locked out of the green economy or left out of decision making. We're creating pathways toward opportunity, clean energy, and second chances. We believe that progress happens when everyone, especially those most impacted, is part of the solution. At our last MythBuster, we heard from Keyshawn Pearson, CEO from Memphis Against Community Pollution, who gave us the firsthand look in what's happening on the front lines of data center battle in Tennessee. We also heard from our very own Dream.org policy associate, Lorelei Hoje, who broke down the regulatory framework that can either block or enable data centers in communities nationwide. If you missed that discussion, no worries. You can check it out. Check out the replay on our dream.org YouTube. Our team will drop that link in the chat for anyone who would like to catch up on that session after today's conversation. Since that conversation, our Green the Grid campaign has continued to grow, so we're super excited about that. We've had over 21,000 actions that's been taken, and that includes 18,000 petition signatures on national and local data center issues. We've had more than 400 people join that campaign, and we've connected with over 60 residents directly impacted by data centers across 25 states. And we've had 150 volunteers who have phone banked for Memphis neighborhoods to raise awareness about AI facilities. Today, we're continuing that momentum with three extraordinary partners who are working alongside frontline communities nationwide to ensure that tech expansion benefits people, not just profits. Together, we'll explore how organizing, advocacy, and policy intersect in the fight of climate and tech justice. So, as we begin, I invite you to listen, learn, and even imagine what's possible when communities lead the way towards an equitable digital future.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tori Soriano. I am a senior organizing manager with Dream.org, and I help bring opportunities like this to your door so you can get involved. And so I'm going to invite you to do our icebreaker for today. And so we're asking you where you're tuning in. And so if you want to join in, I'm going to drop it in the chat. You can go to mentimeter.com and then type this code, or you can use the QR code to join in, and you're going to just drop a pin in your location so we can see where everybody's tuning in. I imagine it might correlate to the data center maps that we see online. Looks like we got some Mexico, California. Oh, yes, and if you're unable to participate in the Mentimeter, feel free to drop your location in the chat as well. Got some few popping up everywhere. We got some Georgia, Michigan, Arizona. Really testing my geography. Pretty sure that's Illinois. That's in Virginia, yep. Michigan, Chicago, yep. A lot of Midwesterners here. We got California, representing the West Coast, Tennessee. A lot of people from Michigan. Nice. Oh, we got ATL. Yep. Michigan. Wow. All right. Looks like we got a good mix of people from everywhere. Thank you for participating, everybody. And if you are interested in setting up a 15-minute meeting with me, if you are impacted by a data center, I'm going to drop my link in the chat so you can book a meeting with me and we can start having these conversations. Thank you. I'll pass it back to EJ.
Thank you so much for that wonderful icebreaker. Love to see where all of you are from. I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator today, and I'm so excited to introduce Naomi Garcia Hector. I'm sorry. Naomi, she is the program assistant to Dream.org's Chief Advocacy Officer. She not only keeps our advocacy machine running smoothly, but she also drives a lot of our special projects across campaigns. So So excited for you all to engage with her today. She's amazing. Naomi has a background spanning from elections, civic engagement, women's rights, and even criminal justice. And so Naomi brings that justice centered lens in everything that she touches. She is deeply committed to advance in equity and systematic change, and she'll be guiding us through our important discussion today. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Naomi.
Thanks for that introduction, EJ. So happy to be here with y'all this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're joining us from. So let's jump right in. I want to get started by first introducing two of our panelists. I want to invite both Taylor and Tim to turn their cameras on and join me here while I intro you. We have first Taylor Marie Frazier McCollum. She's a proud native of Washington, D.C. and was raised in Landover, Maryland, where her journey as an activist began at a young age. Her passion for community and environmental stewardship led her to become the president of the District Heights Youth Empowerment Program at just 15 years old, where she honed her leadership skills and championed youth engagement. Taylor recently launched a petition on change.org to prevent the construction of a data center in her beloved hometown of Landover, garnering over 21,000 signatures. Taylor is interested in one day running for office, being driven by a desire to create a more equitable and sustainable world for all. In recent days, she's become a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation and looks forward to continuing her advocacy by working with her child's school PTA. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And we also have Tim Cywinski, who is a political communications specialist dedicated to building a livable, just future. With over 14 years of experience in political, legislative, and social advocacy, his work advances justice across poverty, human rights, education, economic opportunity, and climate policy. Tim currently leads public relations and communication strategy for the Sierra Club's Virginia chapter and promotes environmental justice at a local, state, and federal level within that position. Previously, Tim worked in electoral campaigns, community organizing, and government affairs. He holds a BA in political science from Roanoke College and an MA in political communications and public relations from Johns Hopkins University. Thank you both for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So, Taylor, I want to start with you, and I'd like to ask you to kind of give us a short introduction about how you got involved with the current data center fight you and your community are involved in today. What does that look like on the ground for you guys?
Yes, so earlier this year, I would say around March or April, I found out about the data center construction through an email from a friend with an article linked to um, basically the planned proposed site in Landover, the $5 billion investment, the 4-building campus, 820 megawatts of electricity. So this is a very large scale data center that we're talking about on almost 90 acres of land. So once I found out about that in like March or April, I decided to start doing more research on what the effects of data centers were in the area and in general how data centers were impacting communities like Georgia, Memphis, Ohio, Pennsylvania. So the more I did research, the more I realized that it wasn't a good thing to have a data center in my community. So I decided to go on change.org and start a petition. Initially, I was promoting the petition solely by myself. And then I want to say from June until August, so maybe like 2 months later, the Party for Socialism and Liberation approached me to create a reel on Instagram. And that reel actually ended up going viral. We have over 300,000 views on the reel. And it led to the petition now having over 21,000 signatures. So it really took off and it gave us an opportunity to get the message out to the masses. And I think that was very vital in the next steps of what happened, because once the petition went viral, our county has what's called a qualified data center task force, and they basically are going to make a decision or help make a decision on whether or not the county moves forward with hyperscale data center construction. So we had a great turnout for their September 8th meeting. I want to say there was hundreds of people. I mean, if not at least 1,000 people showed up to that meeting. It was ridiculously crowded, and we ended up having to go to a separate building and view the meeting from there. So it was a great turnout. And then we continue with building momentum by holding community meetings bi-weekly. And those meetings are giving the community members an opportunity to have their voice be heard, participate in the process. And it's not just PSL leading the charge, it's really the community members that are taking the actions to make these things happen. So they decided after that September 8th meeting to put a moratorium on data center approval in our county. So that basically pauses data centers for the next 6 months. And the county executive also paused data centers approval until December 31st. So we have those two things working in our favor. But the only challenge with our specific fight is that the way that things were planned and approved is that the Landover Mall site was previously approved by the permitting board. So we may not be able to stop it in the way of the data center moratorium. We may have to have other legislation enacted to stop that data center. So that's where we are currently in the fight.
Thanks, Taylor. So there's been wins, but there's obviously still a lot of work that needs to be done. So can you walk us through some of the history of data centers in Prince George's County, all the way up through this planned data center in Landover? And can you share the current status of the plan? Like, what do you think was instrumental to your success, and what learnings can we take from the work that you've done thus far?
Oh, sure. So basically, this site has been vacant for over 20 years. It was previously a mall, and it was a big part of the community. A lot of people enjoyed visiting the mall and spending time there with their families. And once the .com thing kind of took off and people weren't shopping in malls as much, the mall shut down. So it's still been closed since then and vacant as a property since then. So in 2020, Governor Larry Hogan enacted a legislation that would basically bring data centers to Maryland by waiving the 6% sales and use tax in our state for qualified data centers. So once he enacted that legislation, the following year, our county council in 2021 enacted legislation or a bill that basically fast-tracked qualified data centers. And it gave them like a 90-day right to like shovel in the ground, right from by right approval. And once they got that by right approval, that process took about another 2 years before in 2024, the Bright Seat Tech Park was proposed to the Prince George's County Planning Board. And once they proposed the Bright Seat Tech Park, it got approved in 2024. Had I known about this or been a little more involved with like data centers and things of that nature in the past, I definitely would have worked hard to make sure that we applied for a appeal of that decision within 30 days. So since my petition and everything didn't come out till 2025, we missed the deadline for appealing that decision. So where we are now in the fight is that the Landover Mall site or Bright Sea Tech Park has been approved by the planning board, but they have not gone through the full permitting process. They have not done land and water and usage permits and all of the other things that are required to operate a data center in Prince George's County. So we're very hopeful that the county council members will enact legislation to repeal the law that fast track data centers, or hopeful that will slow it down even further by just having more planning and zoning requirements from the county council.
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much for that on the ground insight, Taylor. I'm going to jump over to you really quickly, Tim. So we were introduced to you as somebody who has really helped block 3 harmful proposals with your allies in Virginia for data center proposals. So how did you get involved in work like this? And can you give us your reaction to the arc of this campaign that Taylor and her allies have run in PG County?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got involved in this work completely by accident. My job as a communications professional in the environmental space is to simplify everything. And we have some really great policy wonky people who love to talk about kilowatt hours, and I don't know what that means enough. And so they come to me and say, hey, look, this is a huge problem. And data centers in Virginia, well, we have the highest concentration than anywhere else in the world. The place that has the second most amount of data centers from the state of Virginia is the country of China. So we absolutely know what the worst case scenario looks like. And you've had neighborhood after neighborhood having to live right next to these things, and they're noisy, they're pollution intensive, they drive up people's electric bills, and they shouldn't be built anywhere near communities that have the right to thrive. But it's mutually exclusive when it comes to big tech's pursuit of these profits right now. So I had to study this for about, a year and a half to figure out how do we just talk about this in a way that everybody understands. And then the AI bubble hit. Then ChatGPT and all of those other huge promises, but not really held up by any evidence about what it will do, started to escalate and elevate this discussion. And so during that time, the arc of me getting involved with that wasn't any 3-act play. People just called our office, said they had a proposal similar to what Taylor was talking about. They didn't hear anything about it because transparency is another huge issue of this. And it just pissed me off. So I said, okay, let's just go down there and hold a community meeting. And much to my surprise, the community meeting had 300 people turn out because they've heard all of the horrible stories from all of our neighbors in Northern Virginia and other rural areas of Virginia. And so we mixed both educating people about why these things are so terrible and why they shouldn't be built next to people's homes and neighborhoods. That's not too much to ask, while simultaneously coming up with a compelling message that I think Taylor actually really did a great job of capturing. At the end of the day, this is an issue of fairness and this is an issue of democracy. Do rich, big industry, big tech oligarchs get to make decisions about how much pollution a community can tolerate instead of the community being part of that discussion? These things are always steamrolled in. There's not enough discussion. And if we're just being completely honest, it's a complex issue that none of our elected officials are completely knowledgeable about because they've never had to be before. But this acceleration of the rapid growth of unconstrained and irresponsible data center development, it's indisputable how bad these things can be. And so my reaction to Taylor on the wins that we've been part of is almost follows the same playbook. Get people educated enough about this, give them an opportunity to use their voices because they're the experts of their own community, and make our elected officials look like, almost cursed, look like jerks if they disagree with you. That's really what the game plan is. Do they represent people or do they represent billionaires' profits? Because that's what we're talking about. They could build these things away from people's neighborhoods. They could power them with clean energy, and that would actually be cheaper in the long run. They don't want to because there's a larger upfront cost. And they don't care about how many people and how many communities they have to step on in order to get there because they want to win this proverbial AI race. But if we elevate the fact that this is full of BS, this whole process, because you're literally excluding people's voices, people who are willing to fight back, and shine a spotlight on that, it puts the decision makers in a really tough position to just go along with it. I don't think elected officials are the villain in this story because I think that a lot of them just don't know and they're desperate for revenue. I do think the industry is, and we need more people to be able to willing to stand up to them. And that's just not going to happen in our political space right now, but it can happen when everyday people raise their voices and say, not today, not this moment, not here. And Taylor's doing that. And I'm super impressed by that. And we were able to stop a 500-acre data center campus in Charles City County that would have been built 50 feet from over a dozen homes, all from people who've lived there for generations. We were able to stop a 300-acre one in Charles City, which was right across the street from a generational farm. And when I went to that the farmer's market there, I asked the lady who was across there, because you just see this big sign that says data center, no trespassing, like it's going to be built here. And I said, what do you think about it? And she said, I don't like it, but they have more money than we do, so there's nothing I can do about it. But hundreds of her community said, even though our opponents are telling us that we're not smart enough or powerful enough or rich enough to stop them, we're still going to try to prove them wrong. And that's what Taylor's doing. And those two examples of which I just gave, both of those were winning examples. Both of those stopped a billion-dollar industry because people, everyday people, said, my voice is important, my perspective matters, my home matters, you're not going to do it here. If there was a universal playbook, I wish we could use it, but every community is different. And I think what Taylor's doing, I just really commend because I think it's exactly right.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I'll mention, I feel like you're not alone in what's going on with these data centers making you want to curse. So, so I'm right there with you as well. So, I mean, I think you really hit the nail on the head when being able to give us a good idea of just how dangerous it is when all these things in terms of data center proposals are happening in a way that's undemocratic. They try to hide behind NDAs and do things before a community has the opportunity to fight back. And so I wanted, this is a question for both you, Tim, and Taylor. How would you envision what like just an equitable community consultation for future data center projects would look like? In an ideal world, you know, where AI and where machine learning is not going away, and we know that data centers are going to exist in some capacity, what would the ideal look like for a community being consulted?
Taylor, I think you go first.
Okay, no problem. I wasn't sure. I think that as far as hyperscale data centers are concerned, I don't think there's any way to make them equitable because the companies are not, like Tim said, willing to invest in the right types of construction. If we're not going to do it on a scale where the environment's not going to be impacted, then I just say that the hyperscale is just not the right choice. In Prince George's County, we have 5 data centers, but they're not hyperscale data centers. They're not consuming massive amounts of water every day and putting particulate matter into the atmosphere. So I think that it's just important to think about the environment and how we need it for our future to succeed. We only have one planet. There is no plan B for the planet as of yet. I know Trump wants to take us to space, but we're not there. So we have to protect the environment that we have. And if we're going to put these, I think someone in the chat just said like 853 or 34-acre facility out in Arizona somewhere. Like, that makes no sense. Like, that land could be used for other things if we're going to use it at all. But we do need places and parts of the environment that are just natural and that represent the natural landscape. So I'm kind of just on the line of hyperscale is not somewhere that we need to go as a community. So I'll let Tim kind of hop in.
Yeah, and again, Taylor nailed it. I would like to associate myself with exactly that. And like, let's just be clear, hyperscale data centers, AI data centers. I mean, one single campus can use the same amount, if not more amount, of the same amount of energy as San Francisco. So we're building all these new energy projects, which, by the way, gives the utilities an excuse to build a new fleet of fossil fuel projects, which isn't just about climate, but it's also those projects destroy people's lives and livelihoods right now, and they always put them in poorer areas and black and brown areas. That is a matter of why this matters about justice, just as much as about climate and fairness. And they consume millions of gallons of water. The on-site diesel generators that they use release terrible toxins like arsenic, benzene, PM2.5, which is so small that it bypasses our lungs and goes straight into our bloodstream. And the people who are most vulnerable about this are children. And yet they put them right next to schools. They put them right next to neighborhoods. And they just completely undermine the concerns of the community. I don't want to be against data centers. I'm not against AI. I'm not against data centers, but I don't think you should be able to sell out communities in order to build them. And the technology exists to do that. This isn't a matter of possibility. It's a matter of political will, which is why we need our leaders to become educated on this so they can fight back. And just to really put a finer point on this, in Louisiana, in a place called Richland Parish, Meta is trying to build one of the world's largest data centers. It will be 60% the size of Manhattan. That's how big it is. It will use like, I think the same amount of 3 San Francisco's worth of power. And they're going to power it with 3 on-site natural gas plants. Those are pollution intensive. You can't live around those and expect not to get sick. And that will be located less than 10 miles from 2 elementary schools. Now, that's not acceptable. There is never any scenario when that is okay. But a billionaire wants to do it, so it doesn't matter what the people around there gets to do it. It doesn't matter what the farmers, the people who've called Richland Parish home for a long time. And I'm going to New Orleans, I'm going to Louisiana next week to help fight this thing because there's so little acknowledgement from a broader community that this really has to be ground up. And it shouldn't just be, but the most powerful transformative parts of our history is when people at the bottom said we deserve more from the people at the top. And I'm excited to see how this continues to play out. But I'm optimistic, but I'm also just really pissed off.
Yeah, it makes sense. And these facts are honestly disturbing. But I am energized to know that there are folks like you, Tim and Taylor, who are leading this charge and helping empower communities to be able to fight back and to know that we have a chance and that there's something to be done and we don't just have to sit back and watch this stuff happen. So we're going to take a quick pause and I'm going to pass it over to Tori to lead a mentee moment where y'all will get to engage again and answer a couple of questions, and then we'll be right back.
I'm back. All right. So if you want to join into our Mentimeter, this fun interactive tool we have, you could just sign in if you haven't already, and you can use menti.com. The link that Harrison posted, you could do mentimeter.com, type in the code. And we're just asking how many data centers are in the US. And we ask that you don't cheat. No Googling. All right. Looks like we got around between the mean is like 2,000. Oh, we're getting more. Okay. Still 2,000 looks like the most popular. All right. Any last guesses? Oh, 5,000 is the answer. Technically, I think the last number was 5,400. Yeah. All right. Next question. This one should be easy if you're paying attention. Oh yeah, you'll see uh the scorecard. I think we're doing a leadership board. We'll see. All right, next question. Oh, if you answer quickly, you get the more points. All right, which state has the most data centers? Take a guess. I'll give you a hint. It was mentioned earlier. We'll see. Uh-oh. One of the answers might be in the chat. We'll see. All right, you got 5 seconds. And time. Hey, nice job, everybody. Paid attention. Yeah, I think almost like half that number from the last one, 5,400, is in Virginia. It's crazy. All right, thanks for playing. I'll pass it back to you, Naomi.
Thanks, Tori. Glad y'all got to engage for a second there. So I am going to now bring to our virtual stage Tyson. You can turn your camera on whenever you get a moment, and I'll introduce you to everybody. So Tyson Slocum is a director of Public Citizens Energy Program covering the regulation of petroleum, natural gas, and power markets. Tyson promotes an equitable energy transition that provides renewable energy and sustainable transportation solutions for working families. Tyson serves on the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission's Energy and Environmental Markets Advisory Committee and the CFTC's Market Risk Advisory Committee. He frequently intervenes before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, representing the interests of households. Tyson presents his research before Congress, including testifying in 2025 on the issue of AI data center energy demand, and he appears regularly in the media, including appearances on CNN, MSNBC, and the Colbert Report. Tyson is a member of the faculty at the University of Maryland Honors College, where he teaches energy and climate policy and was named Teacher of the Year in 2017. Tyson, thanks very much for joining us.
No, I mean, it is awesome to be here. Thank you.
And Tori is also sharing Tyson's X in the chat in case you want to follow him on socials, see what he's talking about over there. Tyson, so you've been involved in energy policy for some time now. Can you share a little about your work at Public Citizen and in your advisory role with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to thank dream.org for hosting this and for giving a platform to Taylor and Tim to talk about their great frontline work, opposing data centers. So I work on energy market regulation, where our main goal is to protect household consumers from corporate abuses in the energy space. Because at the end of the day, access to energy is a human right. It needs to be affordable, and it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be clean. And so we're just constantly battling against the largest energy companies to try and make our energy system more responsive to communities and safer and reliable. And that's how we got into the data center issue, because these things use so much electricity, right? A data center is basically just a building filled with millions and millions of powerful microprocessors that are running at full steam, generating tons of computations. And as everyone knows, when you're working on your laptop or holding onto your phone, doing stuff, these things get hot. Microprocessors generate a lot of heat, and when you've got millions and millions of them, they need tons of electricity, and they generate lots of heat that needs to be cooled down, which is where their water usage comes in. And, Tim and Taylor have already talked about, how wealthy and powerful big tech and data center operators are. And so you do have this dynamic where some of the wealthiest and most powerful corporations on earth are heavily disrupting our energy systems, threatening to bring on a lot more fossil fuels and raising prices across the board for households. And so not only are local communities being impacted, but entire regions are being negatively impacted by the rise of data centers.
Yeah. And so Tim and Taylor kind of broke down some of like the playbook that the industry deploys when they're trying to break ground on a new data center. So could you walk us through some of the legal or regulatory mechanics behind this playbook and shed light on some of the more concerning aspects that we haven't touched on yet?
I think Tim and Taylor really highlighted that communities are often the last to know about a proposed data center. And that's because they use a variety of different tactics. They both discussed the widespread abuse of things called non-disclosure agreements. That's when a company comes in and starts negotiating with local economic development officials or local elected officials and saying, hey, this is a sensitive business investment that we're considering for your community. So we need you to sign this legal document called a non-disclosure agreement that forbids you from disclosing or discussing any of these details with anyone, including third-party experts or even with your own constituents. And what we're seeing is that big tech is using the proliferation of these NDAs as an explicit negotiating tactic to lock in local officials, keep them in the dark, and keeping them unable to get independent information to assess whether or not this development is good for the community. And so that's probably the biggest thing that we've seen. And so that's why it's so important for especially the work that Taylor, Tim, and so many of the people on this call are doing to try and push for basic regulatory standards, zoning laws that prohibit the ability of any industrial development, including data centers, to be located close to homes, to schools, to houses of worship, to parks, so that these things are in an industrial area, not where people are living, praying, or getting educated. And second, we just need a lot more disclosure about how these things are going to be operated, what it is that they're going to be doing, and ensuring that they're going to be sustainable, that we can use on-site solar power backed with on-site battery technology to store that solar power for when the sun goes down, so that we're not emitting harmful emissions like what Tim and Taylor were talking about, we see so often with these data centers. And so what we're concerned about here from my seat in Washington, D.C., is the Trump administration is seeking to abuse emergency authorities to overrule state and localities that enact common sense public health and public safety regulations over data centers to try to usurp those. We've seen the Trump administration on almost every single policy issue, whether it's tariffs, whether it's sending military into peaceful communities, whether it's immigration crackdown. All of these Trump authorities are based upon never before used emergency authorities. And he's planning on doing the same for data centers. In July, the president announced what he called an AI action plan, which really was a declaration of war against American communities. And we broke it down on our website at citizen.org. But basically what he's saying is that developing data centers and artificial intelligence is a national security priority, and therefore any law or rule that limits development of data centers is contrary to national security and justifies using federal action to usurp state and local laws. The companion executive order that President Trump authored in July states that only those data centers that utilize fossil fuel, nuclear, and non-renewables like wind and solar would qualify for this expedited treatment. And so what the president is saying is, when you build a data center, make sure to build it with fossil fuels, not with clean, reliable, renewable energy. And so what we're just trying to do is to sound the alarm to states, to local communities, to community leaders, to say you need to start getting your city council, your county commission, your state lawmakers to start building up walls of protection so that you've got something to defend when Trump tries to swoop in and usurp state and local laws. It's really important that we get the facts out there. Artificial intelligence, like any technology, can have useful applications as a supplement, to what we do. But just because big tech says that we need a whole lot of data centers and that we need artificial intelligence to replace what humans are currently doing for labor, we don't have to believe them. Remember, big tech has a very bad reputation when it comes to truth telling. And just because they say that we need AI for every aspect in our economy and in our private lives doesn't mean that we do. And so the AI community, the big tech companies and the data center developers are already publicly acknowledging that we're in a speculative bubble. We're starting to see rental rates for world-class NVIDIA chips decline. So the cost for an AI developer to rent out a data center to get access to the computing power, those costs are going down right now, which is indicative that we're already at overcapacity, and that a lot of these tech companies have self-financial interests to inflate the numbers about the need for new data center capacity because it generates more value for their stock price and makes them and their shareholders richer and our communities poorer. And so if we're already at a bubble, if we're already at a saturation point, it really calls into question some of these fantastical estimates of new data center demand. I think we need to pump the brakes, say that we are already at overcapacity, that big tech is not a trustworthy messenger on what we need in terms of new data center capacity, and that we need to put the brakes on new data centers until we ascertain whether or not we're in a speculative bubble and whether or not the types of artificial intelligence being generated by these facilities actually is in the public interest or is going to be used for nefarious purposes or to intentionally force large unemployment of replacing American workers with artificial intelligence applications. So we haven't signed up, for this, and just because big tech says that we need this doesn't make it so.
That's so right, Tyson. And I think, listening to all these facts is kind of hard. It's discouraging. But I think it's part of the first step, which is to be armed with knowledge of what is going on and how we can then fight back. And so I want to bring Tim and Taylor back so we can have all of us together on a panel here and kind of go into the question of, how would folks that are here and maybe folks that will later watch this recording, how would they get involved? How would they support the work of fighting back against data centers and show solidarity, even if they're not in a community that's being directly affected by a proposed or an existing data center? How would they be a part of the fight as well?
I can start. Um, I think that it's important to participate in the political process, to go to your county council meetings, even if there isn't a proposed data center. I'm sure there's some other legislation that needs a voice to be passed or to be opposed. So really participate in the political process. Don't just vote every 2 years and think that's enough, or every 4 years and think that's enough, because there's so much that happens behind the scenes. Like, so many bills are presented on a regular basis, and if you don't participate, then the county executive, the county council, the representatives for your state, they think you don't care, or they think they have carte blanche to do whatever it is that they want to do. So I really want to encourage that. And then if you are currently in a data center fight, I think that the biggest thing in the Landover fight that helped us get the moratorium was the fact that the reel went viral. So if you have an influencer in your city that maybe is someone that is into nature or shows videos about the environment or cares about politics, see if you can get that influencer to make a reel in support of your fight. And that may help the things that you're doing get a little further and spread more to the masses. And then once you have the masses, I say don't let them go. Get them to come to meetings, get them to be organized. If you're having a hard time organizing individually, find an organization that will be able to help you organize in your area. And yeah, that's pretty much all my advice. I think that we just have to participate more in the process.
Thanks, Taylor. And I'll pass it over to you, Tim.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think democracy is not a spectator sport, and civic engagement doesn't end at a ballot. It starts with one. I think there's much noise as we make about this, the more toxic the issue becomes, because right now, big tech is setting the terms of negotiation. Right now, big tech is rewriting the rules so that they have an advantage or they have an advantage and we are strategically disadvantaged. They are spending 200 million right now to lobby the federal government to pass a bill that takes away states and localities' ability to regulate any AI data center whatsoever. That is unacceptable because our voices are supposed to be important in this country. And I know there's been times when they haven't been, but there's also been times when we force them to listen. So get loud in any way that you can. I think social media is a great tool. Use Instagram to call out how Meta shouldn't be able to build this data center in Louisiana. Use every platform that you can to make sure that our elected officials know that this is a toxic issue, because unless you're in the big tech club, they will run over you. And if you're not dealing with a data center implication now, you probably will be. And if they build this at the weight and the rate that they want to right now, everyone's electric bills are going to go up. Virginia's facing a tripling of our electric bills, and that's not the Sierra Club saying that. That is our biggest monopoly utility, Dominion Energy. If you're paying 115 now, you're going to pay 325 in the 2030s because exclusively big tech's data center energy demand. This is just an issue of like, who matters the most to our leaders? Is it us? Do communities, are they important, or is that just someone you pay lip service to every 2 and 4 years? Or is this a moment for them to show us who they really are, and that is having our backs, not the backs of billionaires? I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being in this position, but it's only going to change if people do exactly what Taylor's doing and start spreading all the information that Tyson was talking about, and just be loud about it. Be loud about it. Send letters, send things, put up these things, and let your elected officials and your neighbors know that this is a major problem that might be one of the most important things we need to act on right now.
Absolutely. And the tide is already turning. I mean, Tim talked about victories. Taylor has victories. The people of Tucson rose up and blocked the initial effort by Amazon to build a huge data center. All these fights continue, but the fact is that people power has the momentum right now. We didn't have the organization or all the facts because data centers were sort of new. And so big tech had the advantage early on because they exploited these non-disclosure agreements, kept everyone in the dark, and got a lot of data centers built without community engagement. That time is now long past. The community has the facts. We understand the hazards that these facilities pose, and local officials are now running scared. They understand that, yes, accepting money from big tech is lucrative, but getting voted out of office for going against community interests has a price. And so we're seeing victory after victory. We're seeing momentum by grassroots groups. So we just need to keep the pressure on. We need to keep talking to each other, sharing information about what strategies are working, what vulnerabilities the industry has, and continue to network and grow our campaign to stop bad data centers from steamrolling over community rights.
Thank you all so much. I know we're almost at 1:50 here on the East Coast. And so I wanted to move in quickly to a Q&A so we can have some time to answer some questions live from folks. So if there's anything that you're curious about or that you want to be able to ask Tyson, Tim, or Taylor, our 3 T's here, go ahead and throw that in the chat and we can get it answered for you. And if nobody has, there's one. Oh, am I missing? Oh, I see. Okay. So the Trump executive order fast tracking fossil fuel, powered data center approvals seems to be an arbitrary and unconstitutional attempt to legislate public policy by the federal executive. Is anyone challenging that executive order in court?
So absolutely. So we can't challenge the executive order until the federal government actually undertakes an action to nullify a federal law or to nullify a state or local ordinance. So right now, the executive order just lays out what Trump's plan is expected to be, and we can't challenge anything until he actually exercises an emergency authority to try to usurp. But Public Citizen, along with Sierra Club and so many other organizations, we're poised and ready to pounce in the minute that the Trump administration exceeds his authority. We've seen them exceed their authority on almost every single policy issue, and we've seen the courts, especially at the lower levels, push back on these Trump overreaches time and time again. And so we feel confident that we'll be able to push back on Trump's pro big tech agenda as well. But that's a great question.
Thanks, Tyson. Any other questions? Anybody want to drop in the chat? If not, I see my colleague Harrison says there's another Menti poll that we can move into before we have our last section. But last call for questions while we have these experts in the room with us.
I'll just say one more thing too about the industry and how they get away with a lot of this on the ground. They strategically talk about what they have to talk about. They leave a lot of things out. It's not just about the truth. It's about they use half truths. They use missing context, like the diesel generators thing that I was talking about before. They'll tell you that that's the EPA standards, but they won't tell you that the EPA hasn't updated those binding standards in like 40 years. They'll tell you that it's not that big of a deal. And here's the thing. Oftentimes, community groups feel like they're not smart enough to fight back on these things. But if you're an expert of your own community, you just talk about why you care, that's enough, because that's supposed to be the most important thing driving public policy. And when they have their own rules, like, oh, you got to come to this town hall meeting, but it's not actually a town hall, submit a question, but we want to get to it, or the industry tries to do like community engagement, those will be designed to strategically disadvantage you. The way you elevate your voice is exactly, I think Taylor gave the perfect playbook about it. Set your own press conferences, hold your own town hall meetings, put the communities first, and invite the elected officials to come, not the other way around. They have to prove to you that they're impressive, not the other way around. So find steps in order to do that. And that will give you a lot more momentum that I think will help push back on the industry enough so that they get scared of you, because they should be, because we are powerful and they spend so much time trying to gaslight us into thinking that we're less than them, but we're actually more.
Thanks, Tim. And we have one more question here on the chat before we'll move into our final segment. Does anybody know what percentage of electricity for new data centers is coming from diesel versus gas, coal, or renewable power? What that breakdown is?
Probably not, because the operation side of the data centers is covered by a sea of NDAs. This is one of the things that we absolutely deserve to know about, but where they get to somehow have legally binding arguments that says people can't tell us.
Right. Taylor, I see you have your hand up.
Just really quickly, when I went to Memphis to learn about their fight against XAI and the Colossus data center there, they had only written down that they were supposed to have, I think, about 13 diesel generators. And when they did an aerial flyover with a drone, it was like more in the 30s. So even if we were to have information on how many diesel generators are operating in the country, or, proposed diesel generator operation, we wouldn't have accurate numbers, because oftentimes they're not truthful in what they're really doing on the facilities. Because they have high security, they can kind of do whatever they want behind their closed doors. So I did want to mention that's another hindrance in getting accurate information on the amount of pollution and things like that.
Yep. Great addition, Taylor. And I do see one more question that I really want to get an answer to as well. So one last one for real this time before we move on. Adrian is asking, my energy bills keep going up. What rate does big business and data centers pay?
That's a great question, Adrian. And this is one of the things that pisses me off, is because we have 3,000 monopoly utilities in this country, which means that you don't get to choose to go somewhere else. And since it's a private company, it's not necessarily the contract negotiations with big tech is under like any supervision of the state or the federal government, because of competitive advantage, whatever the hell they want that to mean is what it means. And so it might cost me 25 cents to turn on a light bulb, but it'll cost the industry 5 cents to turn on that same light bulb, because they get to negotiate directly with the utilities. Imagine if families had the luxury of doing that. We don't, so that we're paying for this build out of energy usage for data centers in so many more ways than just one. And this is one of the key aspects of how this is unfair. We have to bail them out for something that probably won't ever come to fruition in the first place, because big tech has a history of big promises and under-delivering. But it's all happening under closed doors. And like everything that I told you now is what we do know, and there is so much that we don't. And everything we find now points to we can't trust these people. We can't trust the industry to dictate the terms. So this is one of those issues. Is your electric bills going up because of big tech's development of AI? I will say confidently, yes. And we need to open up the hood of why, but I'm telling you, it's just logically consistent. If these things require so much power, they need to power it. And who's going to pay for it? The customers. And they're always going to care more about their shareholders than they are their customers. So they're going to do everything that they can to make sure big tech gets what it wants. And that has to change.
If I can just add, across the board in every single state, large industrial and commercial customers always pay lower rates than household customers do. And the justification in all 50 states for that is, well, a large industrial or commercial customer like a Walmart uses as much electricity as several hundred homes, and several hundred homes, you've got individual billing and distribution lines, blah, blah, blah. With big tech, as Tim was saying, there have been instances where big tech has negotiated below market per kilowatt hour rates for these data centers, and that needs to stop. And we've already seen some positive reforms in states like Oregon and Ohio that would subject data centers to higher electric rates to ensure that there isn't this cost shift, that the demand for electricity by the data center isn't shifting power loads away from serving communities where all of us live, and instead diverting that to the data center, causing power for the rest of us, the power prices to go up. So the way that you overcompensate for that is force data centers to pay more than their fair share for the electrical grid costs that they're imposing on us. So there are already some movement to force data centers to pay their fair share, and we just need to build on that momentum, because as Tim said accurately, there's no question that data centers' energy demand use has shifted more costs onto household consumers and is a factor in raising consumers' energy bills.
Wow. Thank you all so much. This is super rich and important information. Taylor, Tim, and Tyson, thank you so much. I am going to pass it over to Tori to introduce one last person to us for our final segment.
Thank you, Naomi. I'm going to introduce Jonathan Terrell. He is a program manager and environmental justice movement leader with Next 100 Coalition. He leads their campaign, AI, Data Centers, and Conservation. And he has a action that we all want you to take before you leave. So come on down, Jonathan.
Thanks so much, Tori, and thanks to the rest of the dream.org team, EJ, Naomi, and the rest of the team that's not represented here today. Appreciate the invite and all of the hard work that's gone into today's session. Also want to thank my fellow panelists, Tyson, Tim, and Taylor. Apologies that my name doesn't begin with a T, but it's been great to listen to you all over the course of this last hour discuss such an important issue. I want to close today with a call to action and a piece of awareness that I'd like to leave you all with that I think well builds off of what our other panelists have been discussing today. And that is an act that's happening in Congress right now called the Sandbox Act, which is a bill introduced in the Senate that would allow these large industry corporations to request an exemption from any federal policy that they find obstructive to the development of AI. This is, specifically a congressional action that's meant to implement a piece of the Trump AI action plan that Tyson mentioned earlier. And it really is a concern for Next 100 from an environmental perspective. I want to shout out Dream.org's Lorelei Hoje for briefly talking about the Sandbox Act during last Midweek Mythbusters. And Next 100 is specifically concerned about the environmental impacts of this. That is, if a company would find the National Environmental Protection or Policy Act, the Clean Water Act, or the Clean Air Act as obstructive pieces of federal policy to the development of AI or their data centers, they could request a 2-year exemption for up to 10 years on any of those pieces. That is a huge impact on the ability of communities, state, and local decision makers to weigh in on how their local communities and ecosystems are protected under these federal policies. So we've got a sign-on letter that we're seeking organizational sign-ons in order to tell Congress that this is an environmental concern. I'll drop the link to that in the chat. We also have an advocacy toolkit that we have to help folks bring a greater sense of awareness in their local communities and to their decision makers about the Sandbox Act and its impacts on their local environment and federal policy. And I know that dream.org also has an individual sign-on petition that is going straight to your, congressional delegation and decision makers. But I think what I'd really like to underscore here before I close is that this Sandbox Act is an attempt to bulldoze the bedrock of environmental policy to create a sandbox for some of the wealthiest companies in the world to play in and to pollute, to impact local ecosystems with impunity. And that's a great concern to Next 100 Coalition. And we want to make sure that our voices are heard as an environmental collective and across different sectors to ensure that we oppose this act. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. You'll see the links in the chat to sign on, the QR code. You'll see the advocacy toolkit, and I'll pass it to EJ.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And thank you so much to our incredible speakers and everyone who joined today's powerful conversation. I don't know about you all, but I just know that hearing from leaders like each of you and those leaders who joined this webinar continues to just light my fire for this fight that we're in. And so we thank you for that. The insights shared remind us that real change happens when communities come together, speak truth, and demand accountability. So thank you. Together, we explore how to move from awareness to action and from reaction to real solution. These conversations prove that local power and national advocacy must go hand in hand if we are serious about creating an equitable digital future by stopping toxic tech. Please join us in this fight. Sign up for our Green the Grid campaign. Share your stories, your local fights that are happening in your communities that are directly impacted by data centers. Help us grow this movement by inviting others as well. Our team is going to share that link to join our campaign in the chat, and we'll make sure we'll follow up with the email as well. And I just want to close us out by saying that when we lead with collaboration and courage, we show that equity and innovation can thrive side by side. Thank you again for being here, and we'll see you at our next Midweek MythBuster. Thanks, everyone.